This video was originally called, quote, Our San Francisco Sights, unquote, because it related to the experiences of my wife and I when living in Palo Alto, California in the 1960s. But to offer it to the public, I removed some of the more personal portions of the narratives. So when you hear the word we, I am talking about my wife and I. San Francisco is a cosmopolitan city of many delights and sights. This video brings you 16 well-known sites that are visited often by both natives and tourists. The lyrics of the song, I Left My Heart in San Francisco, come to mind. Quote, I left my heart in San Francisco, high on a hill. It calls to me to be where little cable cars climb halfway to the stars. The morning fog may chill the air. I don't care. My love waits there in San Francisco, above the blue and windy sea. When I come home to you, San Francisco, your golden sun will shine for me, unquote. But not all of the sights that you will see were photographed by either of us, and so the images are from two sources, the first using our photos, and the second using stock photos, such as those available from Wikipedia Commons, which are higher in quality, reflecting their purpose and the effort and skill of the photographers. The Golden Gate Bridge crosses the Golden Gate Strait, a mile-wide, 3-mile-long channel between the San Francisco Bay and the Pacific Ocean. The structure links the city of San Francisco on the northern tip of the San Francisco Peninsula to Marin County. The bridge is one of the most internationally recognized symbols of San Francisco, of California, and of the United States. It has been declared one of the wonders of the modern world by the American Society of Civil Engineers. The Frommer's Travel Guide considers the Golden Gate Bridge, quote, possibly the most beautiful, certainly the most photographed bridge in the world, unquote. We were among the millions who have photographed the bridge. We photographed it on both sides of the strait, from the water's edge at a cove near Sausalito to above it from the high point on the Marin side of the strait. We even took photographs of the structure of the bridge from underneath on the San Francisco side. None of these locations would be accessible now due to heightened security precautions. Our photos were taken during the height of the hippie movement, especially in the Haight-Ashbury district. This area, now a tourist trap, is between the Golden Gate Park Panhandle and Buena Vista Park. Our favorite coffee shop, the Coffee Cantata, was located there. We loved to eat their smoked oysters and listen to classical music.
This garden sits in a corner of the Golden Gate Park, known as the Oak Woodlands. The gnarled branches of the native live oak trees spread way out over the garden in an unruly manner. The mist that is so characteristic of San Francisco mornings just adds to the atmosphere and the mystery of the scene. I like it because of its composition and the sense of inquiry it portrays. This is the photo that inspired me to make this video, which would document the enchantment of San Francisco. Quoting from the Golden Gate Park website, while the majority of Golden Gate Park is decorated with manicured lawns, blooming flower beds, and additional ornamental details, every once in a while you encounter historic reminders of San Francisco's native flora. The park is home to a section of oak woodlands situated in the northeast corner, where some of the oldest coast live oak trees in the city reside. As you explore the terrain, travel the dirt and asphalt paths throughout the woodlands to continue exploring an all-encompassing trail and road network throughout the park." Unquote. With an oak tree, you don't get a dramatic display of colorful blossoms like some of the other trees in the park, but you do encounter a scattering of acorns, the fruit of the oak tree, which is quite popular with some of the fauna in the area. The Park Service organizes volunteers for preserving what has been called the remnants of the only original forested area within San Francisco. Volunteers have created a project that helps maintain the oaks to clear the weeds, English ivy, Cape ivy, blackberry, and Ehrharta grass that threaten the environment of the oaks. The Oak Woodlands natural space is found in Stanyan Street and Fulton Street. It runs from a valley along Fulton Street and up a hillside towards Conservatory Drive west.
Here we see a large swan being fed
At the edge of Stowe Lake in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. Stowe Lake is actually a reservoir that feeds a system of high-pressure fire hydrants, the need for which was made aware during the Great San Francisco Fire of 1906. But Stowe Lake is also picturesque and has year-round inhabitants of swans, geese, and several kinds of ducks, including wood ducks and mallards. The San Francisco Recreation and Parks Department estimates 13 million visitors this year. From a vast, windswept expanse of sand dunes, park engineer William Hammond Hall and master gardener John McLaren, in the last 3 decades of the 19th century, carved out an oasis, a verdant, horticulturally diverse, and picturesque public space where city dwellers could relax and reconnect with the natural world. Not only were the plantings diverse, the park hosts many special features and activities. These include Conservatory of Flowers, Music Concourse, DeYoung Museum, California Academy of Sciences, Japanese Tea Garden, Botanical Garden, Sharon Art Studio, Stowe Lake, Aids Memorial Grove, Dutch Windmills, Spreckles Lake and Model Boat Facility, Herschel Spillman Carousel, Oak Woodlands Nature Area, Bison Paddock, and a variety of sports facilities. From Wikipedia, we learned that the original economic purpose of the park was to support and encourage the westward expansion of the city. It was an ambitious project covering 1,000 acres. The first stage of the park's development centered on planting trees in order to stabilize the dunes that covered 3/4 of the park's area. By 1875, about 60,000 trees, mostly Eucalyptus globulus, Monterey pine, and Monterey cypress, had been planted. By 1879, that figure more than doubled to 155,000 trees. Later, McLaren scoured the world for trees by correspondence. In 1903, a pair of Dutch-style windmills were built at the extreme western end of the park. These pumped water throughout the park. The north windmill has been restored to its original appearance and is adjacent to the Queen Wilhelmina Tulip Garden, a gift of Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands. These are planted with tulip bulbs for winter display and other flowers in appropriate seasons. Most of the water used for landscape watering and for various water features is now provided by groundwater from the city's West Side Basin aquifer.
A woman is helping a young girl feed a very attentive parrot. She has her hand
Firmly holding the girl's outstretched arm, just in case the parrot decided it liked little fingers better than peanuts. The zoo is located about 20 blocks south of Golden Gate Park, on about 100 acres on the ocean front. The zoo's mission is to connect people with wildlife, inspire caring for nature, and advance conservation action. A typical day's activities include red panda chat, penguin feeding, grizzly bear feeding, Francois langour, insects in action, big cat keeper talk, meet the Ark animals, giraffe open house. Originally named the Fleischacker Zoo after its founder, banker, and San Francisco Parks Commission president, Herbert Fleischacker, planning for the construction began in 1929 on the site adjacent to what was once the largest swimming pool in the United States, the Fleischacker Pool. The area was also home to a children's playground, an original Michael Denzel, Marcus Ilian's carousel, and the Mother's Building, a haven for women and their children. Most of the exhibits were populated with animals transferred from Golden Gate Park, including 2 zebras, a Cape buffalo, 5 rhesus monkeys, 2 spider monkeys, 3 elephants, Virginia, Marjorie, and Babe. The first exhibits built in the 1930s included Monkey Island, Lion House, Elephant House, a small mammal grotto, an aviary, and bear grottos. These spacious, moated enclosures were among the first bar-less exhibits in the country. In 1955, a local San Francisco newspaper purchased Penny, a baby female Asian elephant, and donated her to the zoo after many children donated their pennies, nickels, and dimes for her purchase. The San Francisco Zoo is directly involved in and sponsors animal wellness or optimal animal welfare. Here you see a hippo getting its mouth washed. Local conservation efforts, conserving pond turtles and Sierra yellow-legged frogs, restoring native habitat, the key to conserving native species. The zoo is part of a growing community of conservation organizations that participate in global conservation fieldwork. Twin Peaks are a well-known site that both native residents and visitors to San Francisco appreciate. Both afford fantastic views of the city in all directions, weather permitting. We have been there many times, at different times of the year and at different times of the day and evening. In the summer, when the fog comes in late in the afternoon and stays until the morning, the sight gives one an appreciation of the forces of nature at work. But we, like so many others, would drive up to the parking area and walk the rest of the way to one or the other peak, just for the view. San Francisco is a city of hills. Even in the downtown financial and hotel district, many of the streets are steep, and some use tunnels to get to the other side of the hill. Mount Davidson is the highest peak in the city, but Twin Peaks are a close second at 922 feet above sea level. Since the surrounding area is at a relatively low altitude, they stand out when viewed from the rest of the city. Before the area became part of the United States, it was administered by Spain. They were originally called Breasts of the Maiden by early Spanish settlers. To quote from the Recreation and Parks Organization, similar to Marin Headlands, Twin Peaks gives us an idea of how San Francisco's hills and peaks looked before grazing and then development changed them forever. The vegetation is primarily a mix of grassland and coastal scrub. Expect strong winds as you hike among plants such as coyote brush, lizard tail, pearly everlasting, and lupin. The endangered mission blue butterfly has adapted to the strong winds and flies low to the ground from lupin to lupin. Native plants provide habitat for brush-nesting birds like the white-crowned sparrow and animals such as brush rabbits and coyotes. We didn't see any coyotes because we were looking at the view. Here you see a photograph taken in February 1961. The wide street is Market Street that goes from near Twin Peaks, where it turns into Portola Drive, to the Embarcadero shipping area on the San Francisco Bay waterfront. One elevated highway you can see crossing Market Street about midway is no longer seen in current photographs. There were vigorous popular opposition to the construction of any freeways, overhead or not. Decline in property values and local business blight occurred near the existing overhead highways. Many elevated highways were demolished in favor of boulevards, especially after the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989. Plans are underway to demolish the section of I-280 that ends in the Mission Bay area and which is said to have caused the Potrero Hill district to suffer. This grand vista encompasses all of San Francisco's northeast quadrant, including Russian Hill on the left and Telegraph Hill, where the Coit Tower is located. Note that there are only about a dozen buildings taller than 20 stories high. In addition, you can see the surrounding San Francisco Bay and the hills and cities on the opposite side. A prominent feature is the portion of the Bay Bridge between San Francisco and Yerba Buena Island in the middle of the bay. Going clockwise from the upper left, you see Richmond, and across the Bay Bridge, Berkeley and Oakland. Finally, you can see the hills of the Redwood Regional Park and Los Trampas Ridge. What a difference 50 years makes. Here you see a current Google Earth representation of the same photo from Twin Peaks that was previously shown. It's not exact, but close enough to discover some major differences. First, there is no sign of any overhead highway crossing Market Street. In fact, when you zero in on Market Street and Van Ness, one sees every roadway at street level. Barely seen on the right is Route 101, a major north-south artery, which is still elevated. But that comes to an end before getting to Market Street. Market Street itself has changed, with trees planted in the center median and along the sidewalks. No doubt these were approved by the Department of Urban Forestry. The major change, as shown in this image, is the dramatic increase in the number of new high-rise buildings. One can count over 24 buildings at least 20 stories high, and half of them are much higher. The tallest is the Transamerica Pyramid Building, seen on the left of Market Street. The streets in the financial district are now described as canyons, much like New York City. Like New York City, San Francisco is the financial center on the West Coast. Interestingly, there was, in the 1980s, a populist revolt against what was called the Manhattanization of the financial district. This led to the city imposing extremely strict European-style height restrictions on building construction citywide. The following is a quote from the San Francisco Department of Recreation and Parks. Coit Tower, a slender white concrete column rising from the top of Telegraph Hill, has been an emblem of San Francisco's skyline since its completion in 1933, a welcoming beacon to visitors and residents alike. Its observation deck, reached by elevator, provides 360-degree views of the city and bay, including the Golden Gate and Bay bridges. The simple fluted tower is named for Lily Hitchcock Coit, a wealthy eccentric and patron of the city's firefighters. Coit died in 1929, leaving a substantial bequest, quote, "for the purpose of adding to the beauty of the city I have always loved," unquote. The funds were used to build both the tower and a monument to Coit's beloved volunteer firefighters in nearby Washington Square. The tower was designed by the firm of Arthur Brown, Jr., architect of San Francisco's City Hall. Contrary to popular belief, Coit Tower was not designed to resemble a fire hose nozzle. From Wikipedia, we learn that, quote, Lily Coit had a special relationship with the city's firefighters. At the age of 15, she witnessed the Knickerbocker Engine Company No. 5 in response to a fire call up on Telegraph Hill when they were short-handed, and threw her school books to the ground and pitched in to help, calling out to other bystanders to help get the engine up the hill to the fire to get the first water onto the blaze. After that, Lily became the engine company mascot and could barely be constrained by her parents from jumping into action at the sound of every fire bell. After this, she was frequently riding with the Knickerbocker Engine Company 5, especially so in street parades and celebrations in which the engine company participated. Through her youth and adulthood, Lily was recognized as an honorary firefighter, unquote. Continuing from the Parks Department description, quote, "The murals inside the tower's base were painted in 1934 by a group of artists employed by the Public Works of Art Project, a precursor to the Works Progress Administration, and depict life in California during the Depression. When violence broke out during the 1934 longshoremen's strike, controversy over the radical content in some of the panels became quite heated. Some of the most controversial elements were painted over, and the tower was padlocked for several months before the frescoes were finally opened to the public in the fall of 1934. An excellent description of the murals can be found in the iNet Tours website. Telegraph Hill takes its name from a semaphore telegraph erected on its summit in 1850 to alert residents to the arrival of ships. Pioneer Park, which surrounds Coit Tower, was established in 1876 on the former site of the telegraph station. As you wander the trails that wind around the tower and down the hill, you may hear the raucous chatter of the neighborhood's most famous and noisiest residents, the flock of parrots, featured in the 2005 film The Wild Parrots of Telegraph Hill. In 1955, a bronze statue of Christopher Columbus, donated by the city's Italian-American community of North Beach, was placed in the park. It is the work of an Italian sculptor from Verona by the name of Count Vittorio di Cabertardo, born in Forlì, 1902, died in Verona, 1979. One might wonder why a statue of Columbus would be located in San Francisco. The bronze figure of Columbus gazing to the Golden Gate is facing west. He holds an open document in his left hand, wears a full-length cape down his back, and wears a neck chain with a large cross. On the document are the words, in Spanish, Yo Rey, Yo Reini, which translates to, I the King, I the Queen, referring to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. The Latin inscription on the sword translates to, quote, Search for the East by the West, unquote. Instead of finding riches in the Orient, the 5 expeditions by Columbus discovered much of what is now the Caribbean islands and Cuba.
Beyond the Golden Gate Bridge, there is nothing more iconic about San Francisco than its cable cars. Cable cars have a long tradition in San Francisco, going back to 1873 through 1890, when 23 lines were established. The Powell-Hyde line was added in 1952. Of these, only 3 remain. The other 2, still operating, are the Powell-Mason line and the California Street line. With a maximum speed of 9.5 miles per hour, they are rarely used for commuting to or from work. The vast majority of riders are tourists. In fact, the cable cars are among the most significant tourist attractions in the city. The cable cars are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Cable cars are propelled by using a gripper to hold on to a moving cable that is just below the surface of the roadway. 2 types of grippers existed, the original, which engaged the cable from the top, and a later version that gripped from the side and which allowed cable lines to cross. Promoters of both systems became quite wealthy from their patents. Each cable line was typically owned by its own company. However, several cable companies were owned by the Southern Pacific Railroad. Leland Stanford was the president of the railroad and over time became a very successful businessman. So successful that he gave much of his wealth to Stanford University, which he and his wife founded, including what was then the largest winery in the world in terms of acreage. The memorial chapel on the Stanford campus is dedicated to the memory of Leland Stanford. In only a few years after the cable cars got their start, they were threatened by new electric cars. At that time, it was estimated that it cost twice as much to build and 6 times as much to operate. align with cable cars, as with electric streetcars. A major cable car company was pressing to convert many of its cable lines to overhead electric traction, but this was being resisted by opponents who objected to what they saw as ugly overhead lines on the major thoroughfares of the city center. The great earthquake and fire supported the hopes of those objecting because it destroyed the powerhouses and car barns, along with 117 cable cars. By 1912, only 8 cable car lines remained, all with steep gradients, impassable to electric streetcars. In the 1920s and 30s, these lines came under pressure from the much improved buses of the era, which could now climb steeper hills than the electric streetcar. By 1944, the only cable cars remaining were the 2 Powell Street lines, by then in municipal ownership as part of Muni, and the 3 lines owned by the still independent Cal Cable. In 1947, the mayor proposed the closure of the 2 municipally owned lines. In response, a joint meeting of 27 women's civics groups formed the Citizens Committee to save the cable cars. In a famous battle of wills, the Citizens Committee eventually forced a referendum on an amendment to the city charter, compelling the city to continue operating the Powell Street lines. This passed overwhelmingly by 166,989 votes to 51,457. The citizens of San Francisco continue to support their cable cars. Wikipedia was used as the main source for this section's narrative.
This is actually another photo taken of a cable car, but you can see Alcatraz Island, 1¼ miles offshore in the middle of the Golden Gate Strait, and the famous Alcatraz Penitentiary on top of it. The island has a long history, with many different uses over time. Often referred to as the Rock, the small island was developed with facilities for a lighthouse, a military fortification, a military prison in 1868, and a federal prison from 1933 until 1963. Beginning in November 1969, the island was occupied for more than 19 months by a group of Aboriginal peoples from San Francisco who were part of a wave of Native activism across the nation, with public protests through the 1970s. It is also occupied by a seabird colony, mostly western gulls, cormorants, and egrets. In 1972, Alcatraz became a national recreation area and received designation as a National Historic Landmark in 1986. Landmarks on the island include the main cell house, dining hall, library, lighthouse, the ruins of the warden's house and officers' club, parade grounds, Building 64, which housed staff and their families, water tower, new industries building, model industries building, and the recreation yard. According to Wikipedia, the main prison building was built in 1910 to 1912 during its time as a United States Army military prison. Alcatraz has been the site of a citadel since the 1860s. The United States Disciplinary Barracks, Pacific Branch on Alcatraz, was acquired by the United States Department of Justice on October 12, 1933, and the island became a prison for the Federal Bureau of Prisons in August 1934, after the buildings were modernized to meet the requirements of a top-notch security prison. Given this high security and the location of Alcatraz in the cold waters and strong currents of San Francisco Bay, the prison operators believed Alcatraz to be escape-proof and America's strongest prison. Alcatraz was designed to hold prisoners who continuously caused trouble at other federal prisons. One of the world's most notorious and best-known prisons over the years, Alcatraz housed some 1,576 of America's most ruthless criminals, including Al Capone, Robert Franklin Stroud, known as the Birdman of Alcatraz, George Machine Gun Kelly, Bumpy Johnson, Rafael Cancel Miranda, Mickey Cohen, Arthur R. Doc Barker, James Whitey Bulger, and Alvin Creepy Karpus, who served more time at Alcatraz than any other inmate. A total of 36 prisoners made 14 escape attempts during the 29 years of the prison's existence, the most notable of which was the violent escape attempt of May 1946, known as the Battle of Alcatraz, and the arguably successful escape from Alcatraz by Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin in June 1962. In one of the most intricate escapes ever devised. Faced with high maintenance costs and a poor reputation, Alcatraz closed on March 21, 1963. Today, the island's facilities are managed by the National Park Service as part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. It is open to tours. Visitors can reach the island by ferry ride from Pier 33, near Fisherman's Wharf. Hornblower Cruises and Events, operating under the name Alcatraz Cruises, is the official ferry provider to and from the island. Hornblower launched the nation's first hybrid propulsion ferry in 2008, the Hornblower Hybrid, which now serves the island, docking at the Alcatraz Wharf. San Francisco is surrounded on three sides by water. It is at the northern tip of the San Francisco Peninsula that has a 50-mile border with the San Francisco Bay on the east and the Pacific Ocean on the west. The bay offers some shelter that allows commercial shipping to dock at wharves to deliver goods from China, Korea, and elsewhere. But it also offers the opportunity for inhabitants of and visitors to San Francisco to get close to the waterfront and feel part of the whole maritime scene. That is what is happening in this photograph. You are looking at a portion of Pier 39. People of all ages, from toddlers in strollers to the elderly in white hair, are moving about, seeing the sights or taking advantage of the existence of a farmer's market, or shopping in one or more clothing stores, or getting an ice cream cone, or large Mrs. Fields cookie, or visiting the California Welcome Center to pick up maps and other information on tourist sites, bus lines, ferry schedules, boats for hire, etc. And there are the ubiquitous pigeons to pick up the crumbs. To quote from the Pier 39 website, Pier 39 is a 45-acre waterfront complex that is a gathering place for millions of San Francisco locals and visitors. In addition to its 14 full-service restaurants, 90-plus shops, and popular attractions, Pier 39 is home to a 5-acre waterfront park and a 300-berth marina. Pier 39 is known for its spectacular views of San Francisco Bay, including the Golden Gate Bridge, Bay Bridge, and Alcatraz, as well as the world-famous California sea lions hauled out on K-Dock. Located along the historic San Francisco waterfront, Pier 39 is 2 blocks east of Fisherman's Wharf at Beach Street and the Embarcadero. Fisherman's Wharf is a popular tourist attraction in San Francisco. It roughly encompasses the northern waterfront area of San Francisco from Ghirardelli Square east to Kearny Street. The F Market streetcar runs through the area. The Paul Hyde cable car lines run to Aquatic Park at the edge of Fisherman's Wharf, and the Paul Mason cable car line runs a few blocks away, as mentioned in the narrative on San Francisco's cable cars. Wikipedia tells us that Fisherman's Wharf gets its name and neighborhood characteristics from the city's early days of the mid to later 1800s, when Italian immigrant fishermen came to the city by the bay to take advantage of the influx of population due to the gold rush. One in particular, Achille Palladini, found it so lucrative he made a fortune wholesaling the local crustaceans and went on to become California's second most wealthy Italian, second to none other than the founder of the Bank of Italy, later to become the Bank of America. He was also a pioneer in developing the fish industry on the West Coast, and went on to be known as the Fish King. Most of the Italian immigrant fishermen settled in the North Beach area, close to the wharf, and fished for the local delicacies and now famous Dungeness crab. From then until the present day, it remained the home base of San Francisco's fishing fleet. Despite its redevelopment into a tourist attraction during the 1970s and 80s, the area is still home to many active fishermen and their fleets. One of the busiest and well-known tourist attractions in the western United States, Fisherman's Wharf is best known for being the location of Pier 39, the Cannery Shopping Center, Ghirardelli Square, a Ripley's Believe It or Not museum, the Musée Mécanique, the Wax Museum at Fisherman's Wharf, the Aquarium of the Bay, and the San Francisco Maritime National Historical Park. Seafood restaurants are aplenty in the area. Some include the floating Forbes Island restaurant at Pier 39, 2 stands that serve fresh seafood, most notably Dungeness crab and clam chowder served in a sourdough bread bowl. Some of the restaurants, including Fisherman's Grotto, Pompey's Grotto, and Alioto's, go back for 3 generations of the same family ownership. Visiting the piers where actual ocean-going freighters are docked is not usually in the plans of the everyday tourist. But we were not tourists. This photograph was taken in May 1961 when we were exploring what else could be seen on the waterfront besides Fisherman's Wharf or Pier 39. We found the Kotai Maru freighter docked at Pier 41, having just arrived from Los Angeles. Pier 41 is actually the next pier west of Pier 39, for the piers to the north and west of the ferry building are odd-numbered piers, and those to the south are even-numbered. Today, Pier 41 is used mostly by ferries to Angel Island, Oakland, Sausalito, Tiburon, and Vallejo. The Kotai Maru was registered with the Daido Kaiun line. The names of many Japanese freighters include the word maru. It is the Japanese word for circle. For the past few centuries, only non-warships bore the maru ending. Its use was intended as a Good Hope naming convention that would allow a ship to leave port, travel the world, and return safely to home port. Hence the complete circle arriving back at its origin unhurt. The Kotai Maru is not among the larger freighters. Its size is listed at 9,096 gross tons, and it had an 8,500 horsepower power plant. It was 151.3 meters in length and 19.4 meters in breadth, narrow enough to go through the Panama Canal. It was designed and built by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, Nagasaki, well before container ships became popular. The hull was laid on January 14, 1958, and was launched on April 19, 1958. This section of Lombard Street has been called the most crooked street in the world. It has a 27% grade. In order to manage the steep hill, it makes 9 traverses with 8 sharp turns in between. It's definitely a good test course for car brakes as well as driver skills. Artful landscaping and nighttime illumination add to its charm. Tourists would occasionally stand at the foot of the hill and watch the cars navigate the slalom course. It is one of San Francisco's more popular tourist attractions. Elsewhere, Lombard Street is a major thoroughfare and is part of Route 101. The long north-south artery that runs the length of the state. But when in the Russian Hill neighborhood and the Telegraph Hill area, it becomes quite different, adapting to the steep hills in both cases. The most famous section, with the 8 switchbacks, is between Hyde and Leavenworth Streets on Russian Hill. The present design was built in 1922 and is paved with red bricks and is bordered by ornamental bushes and flowers, mostly hydrangeas, between expensive Victorian mansions with their characteristic bay windows. There is a debate regarding Lombard Street's claim to being the crookedest street in the world, or even in San Francisco for that matter. Some claim that Vermont Street, between 20th and 22nd Street in the Potrero Hill neighborhood, owns the title. The steepest street that can be driven is Filbert Street, between Leavenworth and Hyde. It has a grade of 31.5%. The street is a one-way street which faces the East Bay and gives you a great view of the financial district before you drive down it. This street is sometimes called Watermelon Hill, a name that became fairly well known in 1996 when a David Letterman clip aired showing him rolling watermelons and other objects down the steep grade. The Palace of Fine Arts has gone through several metamorphoses during its lifetime, from when it was first constructed for the 1915 Panama Pacific Exposition in order to exhibit works of art presented there. It is the only surviving structure still situated on its original site, a lovely lagoon that was dredged out of land reclaimed from the San Francisco Bay. After the devastation of the 1906 earthquake and fire, San Francisco was anxious to show the world that it had risen from the ashes. So, in 1910, business and civic leaders gathered to discuss making San Francisco the site of the century's first Great World's Fair, a grand exposition that would honor the completion of the Panama Canal. Widely considered the most beautiful structure at the exhibition, the Palace of Fine Arts, housing art from Renaissance to modern, was the work of California architect Bernard Maybeck. Maybeck's fantastic creation, inspired by a Piranesi engraving, featured a Roman ruin reflected in a pool. According to Maybeck, this ruin existed not for its own sake, but to show, quote, the mortality and grandeur and the vanity of human wishes, unquote. Like other features of the fair, the palace was intended as ephemeral. At the close of the exposition, it would come down. But when the exposition ended, the palace lived on, saved from demolition by the Palace Preservation League, founded by Phoebe Apperson Hearst while the fair was still in progress. Today, the Palace of Fine Arts is the last reminder of a great gathering that welcomed the world back to San Francisco, and it continues to hold a special place in the hearts of Bay Area residents and visitors. While the palace had been saved from demolition, its structure was not stable. Originally intended to only stand for the duration of the exhibition, the colonnade and rotunda were not built of durable materials, and thus were framed in wood and covered with staff, a mixture of plaster and burlap-type fiber. As a result of the construction and vandalism, by the 1950s, the simulated ruin was in fact a crumbling ruin. In 1964, the original palace was completely demolished, with only the steel structure of the exhibit hall left standing. The buildings were then reconstructed in permanent, lightweight, poured-in-place concrete, and steel I-beams were hoisted into place for the dome of the rotunda. All the decorations and sculpture were constructed anew. Restoration work continued, and by 2010, the structures and the lagoon were retrofitted to withstand earthquakes. Quoting again from Wikipedia, the Conservatory of Flowers is a greenhouse and botanical garden that houses a collection of rare and exotic plants in Golden Gate Park. With construction completed in 1878, it remains the oldest building in the park and the oldest municipal wooden conservatory remaining in the United States. It is also one of the first municipal conservatories constructed in the country. For these distinctions, and for its associated historical, architectural, and engineering merits, the Conservatory of Flowers is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The California Register of Historic Places is a California historical landmark and a San Francisco designated landmark. The Conservatory of Flowers consists of a wood structural skeleton with glass walls set on a raised masonry foundation. The entire structure has a shallow E-shaped plan that is oriented along an east-west axis. The central 60-foot-high pavilion is entered through a one-story glazed-in vestibule with a gable roof on the south side of the pavilion. Flanking the rotunda to the east and west are one-story symmetrical wings framed by wood arches. Each wing is L-shaped in plan, with cupolas adorning the intersection of the two segments. The structural wood arches and their method of construction, along with the decorative woodwork and unique lapped glazing, define the character of the conservatory. The major character-defining elements associated with it consist of ornamental and structural woodwork, including the method of fabrication used for the arches, the lapped glazing system, the ventilation system, and the building's siding and exterior landscaping. The conservatory kit was bought by James Lick, an eccentric businessman, piano maker, and successful real estate investor. It was intended for the city of San Jose, where Lick had built a mansion surrounded by exotic plants imported from South America and around the world. Lick died in 1876 before constructing the conservatory on his estate, and it was put up for sale by his trustees. The kit was then purchased by a group of prominent San Franciscans, including Leland Stanford and Charles Crocker, who offered it as a gift to the city of San Francisco for use in Golden Gate Park. The Parks Commission accepted the gift and hired Lord & Burnham, a greenhouse manufacturing company from New York, to supervise the erection of the structure. Once opened, it contained a large variety of rare and tropical plants, including a giant water lily, Victoria regia, which at the time was the only known specimen in the United States. Today, the conservatory contains approximately 1,700 plant species. Its collection of high-altitude orchids, more than 700 of the 1,000 known species, is described as the largest and most comprehensive public collection in the world. Representative plants from its collections include lowland tropics, including bamboo, banana, chocolate, cinnamon, coffee, taro, and vanilla, as well as Philodendron speciosum, Phoenix riobellini, and Zamia lindini. Highland tropics, high-altitude orchids, pleurothalids, native to mid-elevations in Central and South America, as well as bromeliads, Chusquea circinata, Dracula spp, Trichoceros parviflorus, and Trichoceros parviflorus. In May 2005, a corpse flower species, Amorphophallus titanum, bloomed, attracting more than 16,000 visitors. The conservatory also welcomed its 500,000th visitor since reopening. The special exhibit of summer 2008 is called the Butterfly Zone, showcasing a dazzling array of more than 25 species of colorful butterflies, as well as night safaris that let you search with flashlights for nocturnal moths. So the conservatory remains, in many ways, a living treasure for residents and tourists alike.
And finally, we come to Chinatown, one of the most favorite places in all of San Francisco. Of course, the shops that import a variety of art objects, some of high quality, some not so high, and other stores that cater to souvenir hunters, line Grant Avenue, the main street in Chinatown, as well as some side streets like Clay, Washington, and Jackson Streets. A main interest is the restaurants, of which there are many that offer formal dining and more that offer communal dining, where tables are shared. Over time, your selection may narrow to a few which have the best food, cleanest environment, like an open kitchen, and are relatively inexpensive. A restaurant, for example, which is actually downstairs from the street level and shares its kitchen with 2 other restaurants. There are restaurants offering Chinese American fare, as well as those specializing in dim sum. They mainly cater to tourists who are frequently pushed to hurry their meal. San Francisco's main Chinatown is the oldest in North America and the largest Chinese community outside Asia. From Wikipedia, we learn that since its establishment in 1848, it has been highly important and influential in the history and culture of ethnic Chinese immigrants in North America. Chinatown is an enclave that continues to retain its own customs, languages, places of worship, social clubs, and identity. There are 2 hospitals, parks and squares, a post office, and other infrastructure. Visitors can easily become immersed in a microcosmic Asian world filled with herbal shops, temples, pagoda roofs, and dragon parades. While recent immigrants and the elderly choose to live here because of the availability of affordable housing and their familiarity with the culture, the place is also a major tourist attraction, drawing more visitors annually than the Golden Gate Bridge. There are actually several Chinatown areas in San Francisco. The next in importance is located on and around Stockton Street. It is frequented less often by tourists, and it presents an authentic Chinese look and feel, reminiscent of Hong Kong, with its produce and fish markets, stores, and restaurants. This Chinatown has smaller side streets and alleyways, providing character. A major focal point of Chinatown is Portsmouth Square, since it is one of the few open spaces in Chinatown and sits above a large underground parking lot. Portsmouth Square bustles with activity, such as Tai Chi and old men playing Chinese chess. Chinatown has had more than its share of violent gangs who followed the influx of immigrants from mainland China. But it also has had a strong cultural influence, not only on its residents, but nationally as well. We end this video by giving recognition to the many and varied writers, actors, and sportspersons who could call Chinatown their home for some significant portion of their lives. Many of the district's restaurants have been featured in food television programs on Chinese cuisine, such as Martin Yan's Martin Yan Quick and Easy. Noted Chinese-American writers grew up there, from Russell Leon to Amy Tan, the author of The Joy Luck Club, whose experiences growing up in the neighborhood formed the basis of the famous book and film. Chinatown has served as a backdrop for several movies, television shows, plays, and documentaries, including such hits as The Maltese Falcon, Big Trouble in Little China, The Pursuit of Happiness, The Presidio, Flower Drum Song, and The Dead Pool. Notable 1940s basketball player Willie Woo Woo Wong, who excelled in local schools, college, and professional teams, was born and grew up playing basketball in Chinatown. A local playground bears his name. Actor Bruce Lee was born at San Francisco Chinese Hospital before moving back to Hong Kong at 3 months of age. He returned to the United States at the age of 18, residing in San Francisco's Chinatown for the first few months, before moving to Seattle, which also has its Chinatown. But we must recognize San Francisco's main Chinatown as the mother of all U.S. Chinatowns, of which there is likely one in every major city and in many small ones as well. It ranks high on the list of favorite San Francisco sites. So we come to the end of this travelogue on San Francisco. We hope it will inspire you to see it in person.